All right, so the first thing we need to do then as postmodern intellectuals who are concerned with education is to transform the teachers. The teachers are going to then be the field workers, right, the cultural workers who are then going to go forth into the schools and then do the job of culturally transforming the next generation of students. I have a contemporary example. As it happens, we're shooting this in the semester break between the 2009-2010 academic year. And one of the national debates in education focuses on the University of Minnesota, where the School of Education there apparently has a fairly strong contingent of postmodernists who are putting forth a proposal that will require all future teachers who are going to be certified by the University of Minnesota and therefore get their license to teach in the state of Minnesota, in effect sign on to a postmodern intellectual framework here. The University of Minnesota's Twin Cities is the campus in question here, empowered a race, culture, class, and gender task group in the University's College of Education and Human Development, and this report that is then put forth to the university argues that teacher candidates essentially must argue that the modernist project, the language used here is, quote, the American dream, with all of the elements of that package, must be rejected if a student is going to be recommended for licensure, the licensure required by the Minnesota Board of Teaching. The document also speaks of the, quote, myth of meritocracy, right, in the United States. Of course, that's the modern story, the idea that if we free individuals up, treat people as individuals, eliminate legal obstacles, then anybody with encouragement and freedom can achieve his or her own dream, achieve happiness, and that America is the land of opportunity, open to people of all races, creeds, sexes, and so forth. That all of that, of course, is a myth, that it's a self-perpetuating myth for the powers that be in the United States. This will also require that teachers take a self-critical attitude toward their own cultural heritage, particularly if their cultural heritage is to be mainstream people, white people, nice middle-class people raised in the United States. Quote, recommending language is the following, quote, as an Anglo teacher, I struggle to quiet voices from my own farm family, echoing, as always, some unstated standard. How can we entangle our own deeply entrenched assumptions, right, unquote. So part of teacher training then, particularly teacher training for Anglo teachers, will be for postmodern teacher training to focus on critiquing the unstated assumptions or the ways in which we as Anglos have been molded by our background, and then hopefully being able to take a distanced, critical perspective on those assumptions. That also part then of teacher training will then be for teachers to demonstrate that they have the proper compassion, understanding for all of the other groups, students who are members of the various other groups that they're going to teach. The document goes on to say that, quote, teachers must show that they understand many groups that are typically not included, right, within America's celebrated cultural identity, and that such exclusion is frequently a result of dissimilarities in power and influence, unquote. So student teachers then have to be aware that there are all of these other groups out there that are excluded from the centers of power, and that the centers of power want to keep them excluded. And so what our job then is to be sensitive to the plight of all those other groups and to recognize that they're being marginalized and excluded by those centers of power. In particular, aspiring teachers have to be able to, quote, explain how institutional racism works in schools, unquote. Again, it may not seem that American society has institutionalized racism. It might seem that most of the administrators, most of the teachers are not racist, that they're not teaching in racist fashion. But nonetheless, a postmodern person is going to be able to recognize that this is just a cover story, that if you strip off the good news mask that the institutions will tell, you will find that deeply institutionalized racism is in fact the reality of the way teachers think and teach, the way administrators think and administer, the way social dynamics work out in communities and so forth. Also, we will have to show that teachers are able to recognize, quote, the history of demands for assimilation to white, middle class, Christian meanings and values, and the history of white racism with special focus on the current colorblind ideology, unquote. So part of then teacher training will be to teach all of that the way this culture works, and particularly the way schools of education typically have worked, is that they have this colorblind ideology. We have to rip off the mask of that colorblind ideology to understand that really what's going on is we're trying to assimilate the next generation of teachers to teaching white, middle-class Christian values so that they will then go on and teach the next generation to assimilate. That's what we have to overcome, and the first step is going to be for us as professors of education to train the next generation of teachers to recognize that that's not what they should be doing and to make them sensitive to that particular fact.